Nanyipua anuana o, c'est le continent kunio. Truba klawina pona o, wiye negotaye muneki. Ete awa wina, amai, amai, amai. Ese urite o, ese gwete o, emo tregrete o, na meni yombo. Ese urite o, ese gwete o, emo tregrete o, na meni yombo. Te contena nue, emo tregrete na nue.
My name is John Ackerman, and I was in Liberia 1. I went from 62 to 64. When we first got to the country and going up country, we were the first group there. There were some IVS people ahead of us. We dropped off a couple of young ladies in Ganta to set up their house, and then went up to Senequelli, which is a small town way up, pretty close to the end of the road. And getting there and trying to figure out what was going on, and trying to figure out how to set up a house, as well as trying to get ready to start teaching, which was coming rather quickly. I was 21 years old, had just gotten out at 4 years of college at UW-Platteville. And it was all new to me, and I was a farm boy from Wisconsin, so it was a whole new world. It was quite an impression it made on me.
Angie Wilson, and I was in Liberia 1, the first group to go to Liberia in 1962. My husband and I were teachers at Swen Industrial Academy, which was about 30 miles up from the capital. And we were teaching. I was teaching social studies. And one of the wonderful things about being in Liberia for me was that it was an opportunity to learn African history. And so one of the things I remember is going down to Monrovia and beginning to look for what I could find that I could teach my students about the continent where they were living. And I went into a Muslim bookstore and found Basil Davidson's Old Africa Rediscovered and Black Mother, and I found West Africa magazine and found articles about Ghana, Mali, and Songhai empires, and Axum and Empire, and that was very exciting. My students, because it was when the first countries were getting their independence, while my students acted out being Sekou Touré and Kwame Nkrumah and William V.S. Tubman, who was then the president of Liberia.
I'm Jack Wilson. I was in the first group of volunteers to go to Liberia with my wife in 1962 to 64. I taught English at Swen Industrial Academy to grades 8 through 12. One of the exciting things was first to find out something about African literature. This was an early explosion of African literature, mostly coming out of Nigeria and Kenya, and to introduce that to my students, who at the time didn't realize Africans could write literature and in books. They were familiar only with Shakespeare and Walt Whitman and folks like that from their textbook. And I also had the good fortune of teaching a little basketball, getting some young guys to go out to the bush and cut down a tree and get a local blacksmith to fashion rims and take a bunch of bush school boys to the big city capital and win the first national high school basketball championship. So Liberia has lots of fond memories for us.
Okay, my name is Sharon Mallerstein Lezen. I was in Liberia 1963 to 65 and in headquarters 89 to 90. Oh, and the town is Zorzor.
My name is Judy Reed. I served in Liberia from 1964 to 1966. And it was really a wonderful experience for me. In fact, it was so wonderful that I decided to go back in 2007, and I was able to find about 15 of my former students and visit with them. And in fact, now we came home and we formed a nonprofit, and we're building a school in Liberia and sending a young man to college in Ghana. So it's a long time life ending or life experiencing kind of thing, and I was really glad I did it.
I served in Liberia, West Africa in 1965 and 1966. One of my most interesting experiences was digging a well. The water there was foul, and I had it tested, and it was a recipe for all sorts of ailments. So we decided to dig a well, and the people started with me. We were digging the well, and the Mandingo well diggers came over and said, "There are spirits in the ground. If you guys dig the well, you're in deep trouble." They said, "We'll do it for you for a nominal fee." So they were digging the well, and all of a sudden I noticed they were going sideways instead of down. So one day I was there, and I had a little metal can that I'd used for fruit juice powder. I picked it up and shook it, and it rattled. I thought, I wonder what that is. So a little later, some engineers from LAMCO, Liberian American Mining Company, came over, and they said, "This is diamond-bearing soil. If you see any clear-looking little rocks, they may be diamonds." Long story short, the well collapsed. The next year we tried again. But this time, we didn't use Mandingo well diggers. We got culverts from the Liberian government, and USAID was going to build a school there, so they gave us a pump, which didn't work out too well because some of the stuff was 1.25 inches, some was 1.5 inches. So we had to have fittings fabricated to use the pump. And when we were testing the pump, people were coming all over the country to see the pump, to see if it worked and if it would really pump, which it did. And then we decided, unfortunately, that I would put a concrete cover on top of it. But I had what I thought was a brainstorm. We'd make a pattern, and we get to the river and get sand, and we made a lot of concrete for the cover, not realizing concrete weighs one heck of a lot of weight. So it took almost all the elders in the village and myself to pick it up, and luckily nobody got a rupture. We put it on the well, and it was about ready to be dedicated, and a mouse came running in and drowned. So I had to wait, scoop out the mouse, put in a bunch of Clorox, and we finally got the pump working, and I hope it's still working to this day.
Okay. Rich Fahey, Liberia, 1966-68, and I was an agriculture rural development worker. There we go.
Okay, great.
Suzanne Dawson Fahey, Liberia, 1966 to 1968, and I was a teacher.
Okay, great.
My name is Larry Winterbaum, and I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia in 1967 and 68. I was Liberia 9. I was stationed in eastern Liberia in Grand Jetta County in a little village called Zaytown.
Yep, Tony Hoyt. I was a volunteer in Liberia, did our training down in Florida. Our, well, of course, we had Liberian language teachers. Sort of our group trainers were former volunteers. They actually happened to be in Toy Town, where I ended up being. We heard so much from them, we were really impressed, and they liked us a lot, and they kind of pushed us into that. So we went to Toy Town, end of the road, you know, no electricity, no running water. Great place, real traditional town, a culture that still had all its culture. You know, this is all before the problems in Liberia, so. Well, I started out in the Paramount Chief's house. Paramount Chief had 52 wives. He was a total asshole. You know, got his power partially by murdering another chief. You know what I mean? He was quite a character. We fought a lot. In fact, the biggest fight was when we moved out of his house.
Now who is it?
My wife and myself. Not my wife inside. That's Michelle. We've been married 32 years, my former wife. And It was a big old place, a little off from the edge of town. We wanted to be more in town. It had 1 million leaks, had a lot of rats. So we had the audacity to tell him we were going to build our own place and move out. He was getting $400 a year from the Peace Corps, big money, you know, in those days. So we had quite a battle, quite a battle. Even had a huge trial after about a year there where they sent up a district commissioner, and it went on for, God, I think it was for 3 days. But it was really because we moved out of his house. It was done a lot in Proverbs, you know, kind of Proverbs. He said, you know, fish that swim away from the school often get eaten by sharks. But we had a proverb book, so we would come back with another proverb, and they did it in perfect Liberian fashion. After 3 days of testimony from him and from me, from our supporters, his supporters, they said, okay, we've heard it all, and we will render a decision in the near future. Well, of course, they never render a decision, but that's the beauty of some of the things in Africa. If you don't render a decision, then there's nobody right and there's nobody wrong. There's nobody happy and there's nobody pissed off for the rest of their life because, you know, they don't render a decision, but everybody got it off their chest.
I'm Richard Livingston. I was in the Peace Corps in Ganta, Liberia, 180 miles from the capital city of Monrovia from 1968 to 1970. My wife and I, who had just gotten married, were the volunteers in a teacher training project, a pilot project in which we went to different elementary schools, training teachers in lesson planning and having after school and evening classes in subject material.
Hello, I'm John Olson. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia from 1969 to 1974. I taught 2 years at the Zorzor Teacher Training Institute in Fizibu, and then I spent 2 years at the Lutheran Training Institute in Salier. Well, I remember forming a Peace Corps basketball team. We called ourselves the Funky Chickens, and we played against some of the high school teams and had a lot of fun doing it, and always partied afterwards.
My name is J.P. Perkins. I was in Liberia from 1974 to 1976. I was in 2 different towns. One was Kakata, and the other was in Zia Town. In Kakata, I taught high school, and in Zia Town, I taught elementary school.
Hi, I'm Ron Cox. I served in the Peace Corps in Liberia, 1974-76. I was in Grand Jetta County, near the town of Zia Town, close to Zwedru, doing education.
Fantastic. Hi, my name is Matt Ziegler. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia, West Africa, from 1979 to 1982. I was stationed in 2 villages. The first would be Tubmanville. That would be in Sino County, south, eastern part of Liberia. The second post was in a small village called Bamabundi. It was in an area closer to the Bomi Territory area.
Okay, I'm Martha Whitman. I was in Liberia from 1981 to 1982. I was in Grand Cess, which was then in Maryland County and is now in Grand Cru County. I taught science in secondary school, so kids from 8th through 12th grade. Okay, well, one memory that will never go away is when we were driving from Grand Cess to Monrovia, and we were in our APCD's Jeep, and on the side of the road, a 6-foot black mamba came up on its tail just a few feet from the car. And luckily we were traveling at speed, so we were past it before anything happened.
Joan Lip, and I was in Liberia for 4 months in 1990, but we came home. And then after 3 months, I was assigned to Togo, which I was very happy about because I liked West Africa.